Welcome everyone, this is Danny and Karl with Get Wisdom, and today Karl is going to channel Fred Hampton, who was in my view, kind of a prodigy. He was a young man in Chicago during the formative years of the Black Panthers movement, and he ended up getting killed in what many are calling an assassination in December of 1969 in Chicago. And he was a very smart fellow, very active fellow, very young fellow. He was born in 1948 and he died in 1969. I think he was in his 20s, 21, 22 years old when he died. And there's still some video of him giving interviews and doing speeches, and some film of him in negotiations and stuff that. And he was a remarkable man for his age. His ability to organize and help people and express himself. So his name is Fred Hampton, and that's our channeling subject for today. And we've got 7 questions for him, and we're going to kind of go all over the map here. But it was a very troubling time for this country, and I just learned from Karl that he remembers this event, being a Chicago resident. So we'll probably have some interesting things to talk about in preparation for this channeling. So thanks everybody for joining us, and thank you, Karl.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Thanks for all of you watching this. This is kind of a hot topic. This story, what it represents, and the ramifications. And the reason we're doing it is not to pick on the scab of an old wound that maybe isn't fully healed, but to use it as an object lesson. A time in history when lots of forces were clashing, cultural and otherwise, and not so different from today, because if history teaches one thing, it's we're never done with trouble. It keeps coming around again and again and again. And the forces that be are often intimately involved with the trouble. Talking out of two sides of the mouth, that kind of thing, where they talk a good game, but they're sabotaging things at the same time, or misguided in how they want to help, and it creates new problems rather than solving the old ones. Government's good at that, and these cultural flashpoints often involve the government and the powers that be, because anytime there is unhappiness, it can lead to much societal distress and discord, and that can bubble over. It can start riots going. It can start um, accentuating criminality, people taking the law into their own hands, and so on. And that, as we know, often makes things worse. It's throwing gasoline on the fire. So looking at these sort of clashes can be very instructive. And that's the point of this, really. What can we learn about what these people went through, how it came to be, and really what was behind it that might not have been apparent at the time? Because there's always something behind the scenes. And that's one of the harsh take-home messages we get from this work. We're up against evil. And this isn't just some abstract concept, because the Bible says there's evil. We know evil is real if you look around, and you can call it other things, but we're talking basically about the manipulation and degradation of human individual sovereignty and all that does consequentially. So there's a larger purpose when that happens. It's not just that some people are flawed and they rub off on others or present a bad example. So that's kind of my own personal stake in this and perspective and probing into it. I was around in those days. I was basically a kid, but old enough. I was in college age years, and it was quite a shock, because his death was so harshly overdone that it's one of the more striking examples of the power of the government crashing down on someone. And I remember that at the time, my personal sense was that this is egregious. And there was a cultural backdrop, and we'll be getting into that and talking about it. So I don't want to presuppose or try to pontificate about it. But that's why it's so tragic. It's not just that a young life with great promise got snuffed out, but the reasons behind it. And I think it's really helpful to use this as a lens to look at society in a new way.
Yeah. Well, I think he was a chapter president or leader of the Black Panthers movement in Chicago. And it was remarkable because there was a lot of people coming into that organization. And they weren't just all young people. There were older people and people with skills and, organizational, skills and whatnot that he could have been. It would be more likely that it would be an older person if you look at for all the things that they were involved in. And this is on the heels of the civil rights movement and a new president, and things really hadn't changed, especially economically for blacks in America. So there's expectations with the civil rights movement that there would be some change, and they didn't see that much change. In fact, the economy for blacks during that time actually got worse, and Martin Luther King had already been killed, and there was a lot of questions about that. So he was already dead. I think Huey Newton was the other guy he was in jail, and Edgar Hoover was like, well, we're creating all these heroes here. And the other thing too is that there was these same political organizations like the Black Panthers were against the war in Vietnam, And so they're creating a lot of problems for the federal government, getting a lot of press and a lot of favorable press because of the ways that these guys expressed themselves. It wasn't just about violence. And the imagery was the only thing that the government had to really use against these people, other than stuff that was illegal, like assassinations and infiltrating them with spies and snitches and stuff, was just what they did. And that's basically how they succeeded against these organizations like the Black Panthers. They went in and poisoned them, if you will, internally, and that's how they died. But in this case, they assassinated him from all, as far as we could tell, that's what it looked like. There was an investigation later, and there was a settlement in 1982 where they paid out $1.85 million from the city of Chicago, Cook County, and the federal government. They each paid 1/3 to 9 plaintiffs in this, I guess what they would call a wrongful death. Legal, the results legally. So many scholars now consider Hampton's death an assassination at the FBI's initiative. And so one of the things that we've got in, I think it's the last question, is a statement that was taken from one of Edgar Hoover's directives. Quote, prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. So, some people would consider that in order to, have these guys assassinated. He was due to go into jail, I think 2 days after he was killed. I was talking with Karl earlier, it's like I think they felt like the risk was less to them to have a dead martyr rather than a martyr that was in prison, because I think Huey Newton was causing all kinds of problems for him being in prison, with him being in prison, because he was another young, eloquent black man who was, pointing out truths that needed to be looked at. So anyway, this should be interesting. The FBI, they actually had a project in the FBI called COINTELPRO, which was set up to target political organizations that were going against the federal government's mandate, to keep the war going, and to make sure that the powers that be weren't threatened, and the Vietnam War played a big part in this, unfortunately.
Well, it was a government activity, and it needed to be supported by the government, and round we go.
Yeah.
And the unsettling thing about this is it doesn't seem to have changed in the way that this gets supported and promoted perennially by those in power. We're seeing all the signs now of politicization of law enforcement at the highest levels, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and so on. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because anything that the entrenched political party doesn't like, they have powerful weapons to use. I mean, it used to be all they could do, or at least we thought, all they could do is maybe sick the IRS on you, maybe audit your finances or something as a way of politically punishing people they don't like. But having the FBI research you and perhaps carry out a disinformation campaign by suggesting you're under suspicion or whatever they do in the course of that, or maybe even sabotaging things in the works by manipulating people you're depending on. I mean, where's the line between what's fair and what isn't when you're exerting power in opposition to someone? This is a slippery slope. So, I'm not here to carry a political axe to grind, but as an observer of the passing scene, I've seen this all my life. When the scandals eventually come out, and then it blows over eventually. But my fear is it doesn't really change. It's just the scandal blows over.
Yeah, or they have different tools for accomplishing. I think that's what we're seeing now more.
Yeah.
They're using subversive type technologies, and we've got the internet now. There's a lot more capability for control that they have now that they didn't have during Fred Hampton's time. Maybe they could accomplish the same thing now without having to kill somebody. That's seems to be what's happening.
It's better to be shadow banned on the internet than in a coffin somewhere because they don't want you around.
Yeah.
But still, it's a question of fairness, and then what that does to society in the long run. How are we going to learn and grow and do better if this is the standard? It's the.
Well, back then they could listen to him. There was ways to listen to him. That now if there's someone like that got on, they can make him disappear pretty quick and not have to kill him. And shadow ban's a great example. Try to go on to some of these social media sites and talk about the kind of things that he talked about. No one's going to be listening. So okay, so we should probably go ahead and get started. We've got 7 questions, and this should be interesting.
All right. I will reach out to Fred Hampton in the light through the creator of all it is. This is how I do my channeling so that I reach the subject intended and it doesn't get interfered with. It's under protection, under divine protection. And I do that to avoid the problem of getting an imposter, which most channelers are talking with and don't know it. This is one of the warnings that I give about this whole business, that one must be careful in dealing with information like this. And even though, I'm in that camp as a channeler, it's taught me a lot. And I see the things that can go wrong. And I'm warned about it a lot from the divine, because this is a high-level operation of sidelining people of all kinds. And we're all being subjected to manipulation. So you can't be truly safe anywhere, for sure, without a divine partnership and an active one to help support you and keep you safe. So that's my outreach to consider for people.
And we should mention, Karl, that there is actually a book on the Get Wisdom website called "The Problem of False Channeling," which goes into this. So this is not just you talking the talk. We've actually committed it to a book, a free ebook. So if somebody wants to look into this more thoroughly and apply some of the things that you've learned through this process and committed into a book form, it's I think it's indicative of the seriousness. This isn't just some idle claim, I can channel and you can't, or something like that. You've done your homework around this, and it's been an ongoing process that's been developing for years now. I think when we first met, you weren't even a channeling creator, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is I guess what I'm trying to say is you've earned your stripes, and this isn't something that just fell into your lap and now you can make claims, make idle claims.
Yes, I've seen it firsthand. I've lived it. I know lots about it, and it's all in that ebook. Not all, but a lot of it is in that ebook.
Yeah.
To really show how extensive this is,
right.
The magnitude of the problem, and it's for important reasons, because the interlopers are afraid of people who have a high level of intuitive ability. They know that we can see their secrets, and that's why they do it. They have to sideline people like us because we can see the truth and blow the whistle, and they don't want that.
Right.
So this is not some strange epiphenomenon that doesn't really have a influence on the culture or life or whatever. This is just some local problem of the psychics and so on. It's much, much bigger than that. So
right.
It's important to be aware of what's going on. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of manipulation.
Right.
And it plays out in the streets. It plays out in all of our politics.
All the institutions.
In every institution.
And relationships.
Yeah, that too. Even
Okay.
even on the personal level, there's manipulation. So, all right. So I'll get in the state of consciousness that I need to make the connection, and he will announce his presence once he's on board.
Okay.
This is Fred Hampton speaking.
Thank you for joining us. Were you drugged on the night you were shot to death? Would you consider your death a deliberate assassination by the FBI and the Chicago police, or is there a better explanation? And were you able to transition successfully?
I was able to transition successfully through the blessings of the divine. And that is because despite my reputation and the many characters I associated with who were walking on the wild side through societal standards and perspectives, it was for a good reason and for a lofty purpose. And I was living a mission life to change things for the better. That by definition will get one into trouble because those who do it are going against the grain. Keep in mind the powerful control the minds of everyone through their words and assistance beyond their words done clandestinely. That is a long story we will cover along the way. But those who are maligned are doing so because of something they heard, not something they lived. And that is true for all of you and the opinions you hold across the board. You were not there personally. You did not know the principles personally. You were getting a filtered, partial version of the story. My death was a political assassination. I was drugged to hamper me and hinder me, to make me a soft target. This is the measure of ruthlessness and cunning brought to bear to do the deed. If they could drug me in advance, they could have come and put me in handcuffs if what they wanted was to constrain me, bring me up on charges, and give me my constitutionally protected rights as a citizen for due process. But that is not what happened. They waited and planned until they could gang up on me in the middle of the night with a large force of armed officers and subjected my residence to a hail of gunfire. Being helpless, I was easy prey for them. And the story of my actual demise is not at all exaggerated, having received a coup de grace to finish me off rather than send me to the hospital and save my life. A privilege which legally is required of law enforcement, to do only what is necessary to subdue someone accused of wrongdoing and in need of incarceration. Law enforcement does not have the orders to kill on sight, take them dead or alive, except under extreme circumstances where someone might be an active ongoing threat to others and needs to be taken out because they are armed and dangerous and menacing those around them, and perhaps a deadly danger to innocence. Fighting fire with fire is a deadly enterprise by its very nature, and the outcome is quite predictable that many times a large-scale armed confrontation will lead to further violence when the people involved are committed to a cause and do not put their own safety as the highest objective, but rather resisting the subjugation that put them under that spotlight to begin with and at risk from the high and mighty through their minions in law enforcement to seek revenge. Suppression is usually more subtle, but that enforcement arm is necessary at times when people will not obey and knuckle under. That was the case for me because I had a higher goal in mind and a higher duty to serve the people. That was the purpose of my life. You can question my tactics. You can question my methods. You can question my intelligence, my wisdom, my understanding of my situation, and all that I did in leading up to the subsequent events ending my life. But you cannot question the purpose of my soul and my purpose for being alive at that point in time. What truly brought me there. That was a divine mission. In a sense, a sheep in wolf's clothing. To make it clear to people, I was serious and I was in earnest. And I would rely on strong measures, if need be, to prevail. This is a nuance that is largely missed time and time again when things end in gunplay. And it is assumed it all must have been an illegality and a deserving end for the presumed criminals. But we can tell you that guns are a means to an end and are a consequence of the existence of evil, but not evil in and of themselves. Those who take up arms do so because they are opposed by those with arms. Coming in late in the game and blaming the victim for having a weapon is a simplistic surface explanation for a complex series of political and even spiritual history. The reality of things is that this assassination was ordered by the extraterrestrial alliance to ramp up passions against the cause of civil rights and humanitarian concerns about those who were still hindered by racial discrimination and wanting to keep the lid on it as long as possible because it would foment trouble. the interlopers running your world want things this way. They want to keep the lid on trouble till it reaches a boiling point and then might explode in a dramatic fashion to cause much disarray and disaffection and much suffering. This is hard for people to understand or accept. But we can tell you that when those charged with maintaining law and order, upholding the Constitution, for which they are bound by oath, but turn to excessive means that turn into a kind of punishment and suppression and subjugation of citizens, there is a deeper reason behind it. The fact this happens over and over again and contributed to willingly by those involved pulling the trigger is because they are suppressed and subjugated to do the deed. In that sense, they are more like the gun and not the finger on the trigger. The fact that they are there ready to pull the trigger is a manipulation through mind control to give them marching orders, a rationale they are cultivated within to have the belief it is warranted, desirable, and for which they will be the heroes in saving the day from a dangerous element, someone who is a threat to society. We are talking here about the dark alliance of evil spirit beings who plague the living and an alliance of corrupted extraterrestrials working together to rule the world and inflict relentless sources of injury, pain, and suffering. This is because they are psychopaths. They have been corrupted by the dark spirits as well, but do not know this. In the same way that human beings do not make the connection. Only a depraved person would manipulate a human being to pick up a gun and shoot up a school, a church, a grocery store, or a government facility, or a clinic of some kind. They are the true culprits here. The fact that law enforcement did the deed is not where the story ends.
Okay, thank you. You seem to have captured your lightworker mission at a very early age. Now that you're a light being, are you able to see your life extensions and what would have likely happened and what you could have accomplished had you not been killed?